Viewers, all eyes are on US President Donald Trump and Ukraine President Zelenskyy as the two leaders meet in Washington to map out a peace deal. The talks are happening amidst fears the US President could try to pressure Kyiv into accepting a settlement favorable to Moscow. The leaders of Britain, Germany, France, Italy, Finland, the European Union and NATO are also present in Washington, demonstrating Europe's support for Ukraine. First, Trump will meet Zelenskyy in the Oval Office and then other European leaders. Crucially, when the two leaders met last time in the Oval Office in February, we witnessed a shouting match on live television. Let's quickly recap that moment. Well, this was a meeting that turned into a shouting match on live television. Zelenskyy was accused of being ungrateful for US aid. The confrontation marked a turning point in Ukraine-US ties, and Trump paused military aid to Ukraine after the showdown. US also temporarily cut off intelligence sharing with Ukraine, and it heightened European fears that US would side with Putin. Now, between the Oval Office shouting match and the two leaders meeting again at the same venue, a flurry of developments have taken place. We've seen, of course, what has happened as far as the shouting match is concerned, and that was, of course, on the 28th of February that the meeting took place. Later, on the 8th of March, the UK Prime Minister hosted 18 world leaders in London, where the new plan for peace was discussed at the summit. On the 19th of March, Trump and Zelenskyy hold a telephonic call. On the 23rd of April, Trump puts onus on Zelenskyy to accept the deal. On the 26th of April, Trump and Zelenskyy have met one-on-one at St. Peter's Basilica. On the 19th of May, Trump held a call with Putin for 2 hours, and Trump has said that Russia and Ukraine will start talks. On the 15th of August, Trump and Putin held a summit in Alaska, and that's, of course, following which we're seeing this development take place. Now, hours before the scheduled talks with Zelenskyy, Trump has sought to draw the red line for Ukraine. Here's what he said in his Truth Social post. No getting back the Obama-given Crimea. No going into NATO by Ukraine. And Donald Trump has specified really what the red lines for Ukraine are. The Trump-Zelenskyy meeting also comes days after Putin met the US president in Alaska. Let's revisit the big takeaways from that crucial meeting. The big takeaways was that while it didn't yield any kind of agreement or in fact of deal that took place, the leaders, however, described these talks as being productive. Putin offered to meet next time in Moscow, and Trump said that it is up to Zelenskyy now to secure a deal. Days after Putin met Donald Trump, the Russian president today dialed Prime Minister Modi as well. Their discussion was focused on Putin's recent Alaska meeting with US President Donald Trump over a proposed peace deal. After the call, the Prime Minister reaffirmed that India has consistently advocated for a peaceful resolution of the Ukraine conflict and supports all efforts towards that goal. Meanwhile, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is in Delhi as India and China renew their efforts at improving ties. Wang Yi has met S. Jaishankar, and the External Affairs Minister has told him that differences should not be allowed to become disputes. A big breaking news coming in. High-level sources have told Times Now that there is no tension along the LAC right now. The body language being seen is positive. There's no belligerence at the moment. There are routine border management meetings taking place at the colonel and brigadier level, and the last major general level meeting was over a week ago. These meetings have been cordial, but importantly, there's been no complete pullback by China. They are across the line of actual control. However, they're still close, and while they're there, there's been a major thinning out of the troops by the Chinese. Srinjoy Chaudhary joining us for this very significant development. Srinjoy, while there is no complete pullout, there's been a thinning out of troops. What does this mean in real terms, in terms of the total number of soldiers who may be there on ground?
It's a gesture, and a good gesture. And you rightly said that there is no belligerence along the line of actual control. The body language is good. There is no tension. And as you rightly said, even when these meetings between colonels and brigadiers on both sides have happened, there was a sense of cordiality which existed in the meetings, and that is particularly important. These meetings have been on local border management issues. Someone has gone across by mistake, some cattle has come across by mistake, those kind of things.
Right.
But nevertheless, the important point is there is no tension.
Okay.
But importantly, Madhav, there has been a thinning out, but those troops on the ground are still close to the LAC.
All right.
Yes, close to the LAC, but thinning out.
All right. Thanks so much, Srinjoy, for joining us with that quick update. Let me quickly open this out and take it across to our guest.
Watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 2 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Let me introduce our panelists. Joining us with us is Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow of the ORF. With us also is Matthew Bartlett, who's a Republican strategist and former Trump appointee to the State Department of the First Administration. We have Dr. Jeffrey Gunter, who's a former U.S. Ambassador. Alexander Kara is a former Ukrainian diplomat joining us. And Einar Tangen is Senior Fellow at the Taihe Institute and Chairman of Asia Narratives joining us. I'd like to thank all of you gentlemen for joining us, but I don't know if you heard the breaking news we just put out. Matthew Bartlett, perhaps President Trump deserves a Nobel, not for the reasons that he expects, but perhaps for bringing India and China closer. You have Wang Yi here in the national capital. You have troops thinning out at the LAC, something that many believed was a deadlock that could not be broken. That appears to have happened with President Trump's recent interventions.
Yeah, we'll certainly see. I mean, the hotspots, can produce different outcomes. Arguably, bilateral relationships should continue on and potentially supersede. But yeah, we right now we're focused on the president's focused on a big day here in Washington with Russia and Ukraine, and certainly conversations with other countries and allies will continue on.
Right. Let me bring in Sushant on that point, though. Sushant, I know we've just broken this information. Wang Yi here in the national capital, nobody really knew or expected something like this to happen. But the very fact that there's been thinning out happening at the borders, how significant is this? And the question that many would be asking is that, is this really something that the U.S. taking a hard line or a hard position against India has really led to effectively?
Well, I think it has proved to be a bit of a catalyst for this kind of movement taking place. And to that extent, I think if there can be a thaw and some kind of an understanding between India and China, perhaps both of us should nominate Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize, which he's, desperate for. And I've never seen anybody actually ask for a prize with such desperation as I see the American president. And I think he seems to simply degrade the position of the presidency of the United States. But having said that, yes, I think, look, if the troops are thinning out, as they seem to be, it means that tensions are reducing. If you have troops amassed along the LAC, then the danger of things spiraling out of control is that much greater. But if troops are thinning out, it means that tensions are reducing. And that's good as far as India and China are concerned. Does that mean that all our problems are sorted out? Far from it. But I would imagine that this is a golden opportunity that has been presented by the Americans with their what I would call irrational targeting of India and singling out of India almost as though we are some kind of an enemy state. The Chinese buy oil from America and the Americans say, well, Chinese, when they buy oil, it stabilizes the market. But when Indians buy oil from Russia, it fuels the war. I cannot understand this logic. The Europeans buy gas from Russia, that doesn't fuel the war. The Turks buy oil, gas and coal from Russia, that doesn't fuel the war. But Indians buying oil from Russia fuels the war. So it's that the Trump administration has almost declared India enemy number one. And actually not for any fault of ours. But if that brings us to some kind of a thaw in the neighborhood, I don't see why we should not welcome it.
Absolutely. In fact, Dr. Gunter, would you like to respond to that? It's the hypocrisy on, how India is allegedly funding the war machine of Russia, but all others, whether it is, China, whether it is the EU purchasing energy, there's no problem over there. Why this hypocrisy then?
Please. Yeah, I mean, the reality is everyone wants to get on the Trump peace train right now. And whether it's India and China, whether it's Ukraine and Russia, we've already seen the results of the Trump peace train in Armenia, Azerbaijan, and around the world. There is peace in the air right now, and everyone wants to get on board, wants to join President Trump. And let's face it, India is a peace-loving country, and there's no doubt that they want to get on the Trump peace train as we watch all these amazing compliments. Think about it. With all the negative comments from so many of your guests about President Trump, who would ever thought that world leaders from around the world, never been seen before, are aggregating at the White House today, promoting peace between Russia and Ukraine? And there's not a single person on this planet who could do what President Trump is doing today, right now. And for all of us as political pundits and former ambassadors and diplomats, for us, it's talk. But for those people on the ground in Ukraine and Russia, there are people dying, there are men, women, and children dying and being maimed, and there's a deep obligation on the part of our entire community in the world to stop the killing. President Trump is the peacetime president, and we're watching all the countries trying to get on the peace Trump train right now.
Okay, the peace Trump train. Okay, Sushant wants to come in. I'm going to let Sushant respond before I go across to Einar Tangen. Sushant.
No, just 2 or 3 very quick points. One, I think the sarcasm has been lost. But I suppose this is quite a humorless panel, so maybe that is why. Second, I don't think the Europeans are gathered in Washington to promote peace. I think they're gathered in Washington to seek a prolongation of the war. The American president, however, I think understands, and to that extent I would give him credit, that he understands that there's a reality of the battlefield, and he is asking the other parties to adjust to that reality. Now, whether that is fair or not fair, I'm not getting into that argument. It's obviously not fair to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians will certainly bawl at the terms which are being offered to them. I don't blame them for it. But there is a reality on the ground, and there's a reality of war. And to that extent, I agree with what President Trump is trying to do. But I don't think the Europeans have gathered in Washington to promote peace. I think they've gathered in Washington to seek that the war continues and there is no peace deal on Russian terms.
Okay, you want to respond to that, Alexander Khara?
Yes. Don't forget.
First of all, our European partners now in Washington, not because they want to prolong the war, but because they want to protect the interests of Ukraine and that of Europe. And certainly Russia is a direct threat, not just to Ukraine, not just to the former Soviet space, but to Europe as a whole. Secondly, we appreciate the willingness of Mr. Trump to put an end to this war. But we are not happy with the way how he is doing recently. Before the summit in Alaska, he pledged to have a ceasefire, otherwise to impose tariffs on Russia. But during the summit, this cordial meeting with Putin, he didn't say anything, and they didn't produce any results, public results of this meeting. And after that, Mr. Trump is saying that Ukraine should forget about NATO and should forget about the sovereign territory of Ukraine, to name Crimea. And certainly it's not acceptable neither for Ukraine nor for our European partners, and I believe for India as well, because you have some territories that your neighbors claim to be yours. And if there is a precedent, if it's set as a precedent, it means that they can fight the war, occupy your territory, and then broker peace, and then legalize their illegal annexation. So I don't think that it's good to follow this step. And I hope that during these tough talks between Zelenskyy and Trump,
you're asking for too much. Okay, you're asking for too much, Matthew Bartlett. Your quick response to Alexander Khara, because he says this is not going to be something that Zelenskyy will be able to sell back home in Kyiv, not getting into NATO, and certainly not as far as the sovereign territories are concerned. Both of these are not going to be acceptable.
It is unclear. Let's see what happens today. It seems as if there's already a notion of President Trump agreeing to or detailing some sort of a non-NATO security agreement, one which would safeguard Ukraine, certainly bolster European allies, yet also be acceptable to, again, this murderous dictator, Vladimir Putin, who has this strange notion of a NATO infringement being some sort of rationale for an invasion. So if you can somehow square that circle, make this acceptable to everyone. And again, the president has made clear, and the world has seen this before. In 2014, Putin took land at the barrel of a gun in Crimea. War is awful. And sometimes making peace is equally as painful, yet it is far preferable to the status quo alternative of people getting killed. 20,000 Russians last month alone. Vladimir Putin, this is a meat grinder. The Secretary of State said he has a lot of meat to grind. So yes, we are trying to sort this out. It seems as if the initial conversation with Putin has now led to today a conversation with Zelenskyy, with European allies. We'll see if everyone can come to a deal for better outcomes for the world.
All right, I want to bring in Einar Tangen as well. Einar Tangen, to use a phrase that was used by one of our panelists earlier in this debate, where Dr. Gunter said that it's a time when everyone wants to get on the Trump peace train. Is that really something that we're looking at? And when we look at India and China coming together, is it just peace? Of course, both countries would want peace, but it seems to be something that has been forced by the recent positions and the hard line that has been taken by Trump.
Well, China officially has declared that they're in favor of anything that does bring peace. But I think you have to look at this, quote, peace train. First off, it was supposed to be settled before Trump entered office. Then it was 24 hours. Well, it's been 8 months. A lot of people have died in between. He seems to be motivated as much by trying to, get the attention off the Epstein files and what's happening domestically with the economy as anything. So, at this point, it's really hard to judge Donald Trump. Let's look, you might not like Putin. I don't approve of what he did, but it was inevitable, despite what my last colleague said, that once the U.S. went into Ukraine through NATO and with the EU, that they would fight. So it was predictable, not something that anyone wanted to happen except the U.S. and Europe, who saw it as an opportunity to isolate Russia. But at this point, I don't think that you really have a complete peace process. You cannot negotiate on behalf of another country and the surrounding area without their consideration. Putin, to his credit, has called 15 leaders and briefed them on what his proposal was. And what we're seeing today is a kind of an ambush, Donald Trump trying to steal the spotlight and throw something out there that no one has agreed to. He thinks should work. Who knows what it will be? If it's putting security guarantees and mixing it with non-NATO membership, it might fly with some countries. But the important countries right now are Ukraine and, of course, the EU, because it's on their doorstep. And in the end, Russia wants to have security guarantees. And it's not going to end until they have what they believe is a non-aligned buffer around their borders. This is something historically that Russia has always insisted on.
All right. Dr. Gunter, many questions there, but the largest question is this. We all saw how the last meeting went down. What's the guarantee that this meeting won't blow up in the face as well?
Well, I would contend that it was not blowing up last time. It was a tremendous success. You have to listen to the comments of Steve Witkoff, where basically he defined and he had a very good understanding of what we're trying to solve here. We're trying to solve the deep security concerns of Ukraine, equivalent of Article 5 protection, similar to if you attack one, you attack all. That's a very important understanding that not only did we learn from the Ukrainians, but the Russians seem to implicitly comprehend, understand, and could live by. As far as territorial concessions, President Trump has said from the beginning, the territorial concessions have to be made by the individual parties, specifically Zelenskyy. And America cannot impose those territorial restrictions or giving up Donbass or other areas. That has to be done between the two parties. But like I said, this is a Trump peace train, and everyone wants to get on it right now across the world, whether it's India and China, and good things happen when you hop on the Trump peace train, and the same pomp and circumstance, the same phenomenal optics that we saw going on in Alaska and elsewhere, I'd love to see between Trump and Modi someday soon. I predicted it on your show weeks ago, and we are going to see that again. So all is not lost between India and America. The Trump peace train continues. And as far as the comments, having to do with Jeffrey Epstein, that's really far below so many of us on the panel right now to have any belief that this has anything to do with Epstein. It's just a red herring. We have people dying on the battlefield. Let's focus on saving lives across the world. Let's focus on saving lives across India. And there's no greater peace-loving country than India, no greater democracy among the United States, too. We're great friends. And we're all going to get on this Trump peace train, and we're going to see some great things happening.
Sushant, are you really optimistic? Are you really that optimistic? Because there are many who say that perhaps, the entire relationship that has been built for the past 2.5 decades could have been pretty severely damaged by the kind of commentary that we've seen. Even today, for instance, we know what Rubio has said about India and China. In fact, buying Russian oil is concerned. What Navarro has written about India funding Russia's war. All of these comments coming in from top people, top faces in the Trump administration, certainly causing a huge amount of concern in that sense.
Sure, of course. Joe Biden.
And it's inexplicable, Madhav, is the fact that there is no reason why the Americans should have done this. Even if they had certain reservations, and given the kind of relationship we had, and the fact that President Trump used to say Modi is a very good friend of his, they could have had quiet conversations and tried to figure this out, rather than going public, saying the most obnoxious things about India. And yes, we are a proud country. We are a proud people. We are not some other country, that you can simply insult and think that, well, it's par for the course. Sorry, we are not that, right? So yes, we take it personally and we take it strongly. This should have been understood. There are enough professionals in the American system to have put this in the ear of the administration on how to, behave in a more diplomatic manner. No self-respecting country will take that kind of language.
Right.
It's simply acceptable. Secondly, look, if I agree with what Donald Trump is trying to do. I think he's been very realistic on Ukraine. Again, I'm not saying that what the Russians did is the right thing. I can understand their motivations and their security concerns. I think what Trump is trying to do is also doing the same thing. Now, it's just too bad that things have reached such a pass. And there is a certain, there's a certain fate accomplished to this whole thing. Now, the Europeans want that this war should carry on, and I can understand the Ukrainians being very, very resistant to the idea of having to surrender territory and even have their sovereignty to some extent curtailed by whatever deal is being carried out. But like other people have said, what are the options? There are no good options on the table. So you have to take the best of the bad options, and perhaps what Trump is suggesting is best of the options. And just one last point. See, the China normalization process preceded our spat with the Americans. Okay? I've been trying to bring a degree of calm on the border, and that engagement has been going on for many, many months now. It's slow and it's been steady, but it has been progressing in parts.
Okay.
But maybe now there is a certain urgency to solving this as fast as possible.
Okay. Let me quickly bring in Alexander Khara on that. Alexander Khara, it's not the most ideal situation, but sometimes in such situations you have to take the best of the worst options that one has before us. That's the argument coming in from Sushant's side.
Well, actually, if you ask someone, Brits or French, back in 1941 or 42, certainly there would be some people who would say, let's agree on some territorial concession to Adolf Hitler. But for some reason, the Brits decided to fight on, and actually they came out victorious out of that. May I address a couple of other things? First of all, there is no legitimate Russian security concern on the territory of Ukraine or any other countries. When the Russians attacked us back in 2014, Ukraine was non-bloc country with majority of Ukrainians against membership in NATO. It's just the Russian attacks that changed the mind of Ukrainians. Secondly, the Russians fought in Syria, now they're in Libya, in the Sahel region, in Sudan, in many other countries. None of those countries are willing to join the European Union or NATO. So it's not about security concerns of Russia. It's about neo-imperial and revisionist vision of the world and the better place as seen in the Kremlin in Europe. So that's why it's not just a threat to Ukraine, but the whole of Europe. And finally, contrary to common knowledge or common sense as being portrayed in the Western media, so there is no military solution to the war, but diplomatic one. I believe vice versa. Actually, recently, the UK Defense Intelligence, they said that with such a pace and with such a
all right, completely out of time. Sorry, I'm interrupting you there, Alexander Khara. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Jeffrey Gunter, Matthew Bartlett, Sushant Sareen, and Einar Tangen for joining us this evening. All eyes on what really comes out of that meeting.
The News Hour at